What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Go Talk with Marcus, powered by Podex, fueled by Go Fuel. Once again, joining me on the show is my good friend Steezy A. Smith. What's up, man? How you doing?
Yo, as always, I'm feeling good, feeling blessed. I know you're a little exhausted, but I hope you're feeling good.
I am feeling good, just mentally, physically, emotionally exhausted, and it's all the people's fault. So much demand for Go Talk with Marcus, trying to do my best to be great and stuff. It's all y'all's fault, but it's all good though, because old people say, you make your bed, you lie in it. I made the bed. I'll lie in it. It's fine. I have no problem with that. Anyway, enough about me. Let's talk about the Seattle Seahawks. Just a disclaimer: I do know we're supposed to be going in draft order. Unfortunately, due to some scheduling issues. However, while this is technically the 10th episode of the series because the Seahawks picked 10th. This is the 11th episode that's come out because we had to switch some things around. So the Commanders came out on Monday. This is Seattle, but we will be back on track moving forward, starting on Friday with the Minnesota Vikings, which is the 12th episode of this series. Housekeeping stuff aside, let's talk about your Seattle Seahawks, Steezy, because probably if not the most shocking, it's definitely up there with one of the most shocking moves of this past offseason in the NFL. Russell Wilson waiving his no trade clause to leave Seattle, to go to Denver, to start fresh, to join the AFC, specifically the very extremely stacked now AFC West, which means that there's a major void on the most important position on the team for the Seattle Seahawks. You've got Drew Lock, obviously, and Geno Smith in your on your payroll right now as quarterbacks. There is still the looming potential that Baker Mayfield joined the team via trade. We know that at this point, it's down really to Carolina and Seattle. Many people believe that Carolina is more likely option, but you can't rule Seattle out just yet. I know Seattle hasn't ruled them out just yet. So, with that being said, who will be the starting quarterback for your Seattle Seahawks come week 1 this year?
The starting quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks is going to be number 2, Drew Lock, Mr. Drew Lock. I know that probably doesn't excite a whole bunch of especially Seattle Seahawks fans, but look, at the very least, he's a reclamation project, right? I think with the Geno Smith, we know what we're going to get out of a Geno Smith. I think the fans know what they're going to get out of a Geno Smith. He's 30, 31 years old, and I just don't think that he's going to all of a sudden just come in and perform like a quarterback that we've never seen before. He's a veteran. I know he spent the last 3 or 4 years as a backup. I do understand that guys, especially quarterbacks quarterbacks even, they get better, and so maybe he has gotten better. Maybe the fact that he spent some time in that system, he has firsthand knowledge, of a lot of things that's going on. That's definitely going to help him. And I think that's one of the reasons why he has the quote unquote edge, right, over Drew Lock in training camp, or what is it? We're not even in training camp yet, actually OTA.
Yeah.
So, ultimately, I think it's going to be Drew Lock. I think with the Drew Lock, there's still a little bit of unknown. I like the mystique that still kind of surrounds him. Obviously, coming out of college, he was highly touted. He went in the second round, probably should have went in the first round. At Mizzou, he showcased a lot of playmaking ability. He was sneakily athletic. And I think, in Denver, we saw flashes of that. And I'm not trying to make excuses for him, but in his first full season as a starter, he didn't have Cortland Sutton. Cortland Sutton tore his ACL in week 2. That year that he was supposed to, or the year that he started. And the year in which he started was the COVID year. He didn't have training camp. He didn't have any sort of time to establish any sort of chemistry with the Jerry Jeudy, with the offense. And I know other quarterbacks exceeded in that environment. Fact of the matter is he didn't. But then again, he didn't have his number 1 wide receiver. His number 2 wide receiver was a rookie. And, that was really their first time working together. And so there were a lot of things that I feel like Denver did to kind of fail him. And he also failed Denver at the same time. But I think in Seattle, he has a better receiving duo. He has a coach that's invested. And I think, with them as invested as they are, that's definitely going to instill some much needed confidence, because he's definitely had his confidence in the last couple of years has completely been deflated. You know what I mean? And so to be able to play for a team that believes in you, or even if they don't 100% believe in them, at least that's what they're putting it out to be. Right. And that's, I guess, the only way to kind of go about it. And so I think all those things, will ultimately end up in why Drew Lock will be the starting quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks this coming season. And who knows, even if he loses a lot of games for us, Seattle could land a top 5, top 10 pick in the draft next year, and they could find their future at quarterback. And so I think it's pretty much a win-win situation if you start a Drew Lock if you're Seattle.
I'll be honest, I don't really think it matters who the starting quarterback is going to be because he's not going to be the starting quarterback after next season. So it really doesn't matter. Like, he's going to get replaced by the rookie, and as well, I think Pete Carroll. But we'll talk about that later in the show. If I have to pick, I'll pick Drew Lock. He's the better quarterback. Geno Smith knows the system, sure, but like Geno Smith's not a good quarterback at this point in his career. Hasn't been a good quarterback for a while now. There's really not much else to say. I mean, I don't know why this is a QB competition. I'll be honest, in Seattle. I mean, I think it's quite obvious that Drew Lock is the better quarterback. There is upside potential to Drew Lock. I don't see it happening, but there is a very, 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 very slim possibility that maybe the Seahawks hold on to Drew Lock past this season as far as him being the starter. Do I think that's going to happen? No. But Drew Lock balls out, shocks a lot of people, gets in the, in anything is possible. This is the National Football League we're talking about here. Drew Lock will be the starter because he's the better quarterback, but it's not going to matter. The Seahawks will still bring up the caboose in the NFC West again, I think, this season, and they'll be top 10 picking a quarterback, whether that's C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young or one of the other very talented quarterbacks that are coming out into the draft next season. With that being said, though, and ironically enough, this just kind of works, right? The flow for this show was set about a week and a half ago, and today, being Tuesday, Terry McLaurin signed a 3-year, $71 million extension with the Washington Commanders. So now he's been paid. We've already seen AJ Brown get paid earlier in the offseason on draft night, which moved him to Philly. We've seen Devontae Adams get paid. We've seen all these wide receivers getting paid, and now it's time for Terry McLaurin to get paid, which means that now there's 2 guys left in that 3-year wide receiver bucket that haven't gotten paid yet: Deebo Samuel and DK Metcalf. So with that being said, is DK Metcalf's future in Seattle secure?
It's hard for me to say it's 100% secure, but I think for the foreseeable future, yes. Because if Seattle, if they're to extract, or if they were to extract maximum value, I think a trade would have happened before the draft. You know what I mean? Now, if you wait until next year, or if you wait until after the year, I don't think you'd be getting nearly as much in return. And so I think that's one of the reasons that would signal, a looming extension or an imminent extension between the Seahawks and DK Metcalf. Seattle usually, and typically, they don't extend guys until right around training camp. And so training camp, like we talked about, hasn't even started. And training camp won't start until we have another month. Seattle, I think, starts on July 27th. And so I wouldn't expect a contract to be handed out until then. And so for now, I get why some people would still kind of speculate as to why he hasn't signed. Oh, he's going to get traded, or they're not in the win now position, so why extend a guy like him? I just think he's one of the few stars remaining, on this football team. And I think that next year, once you do get a quarterback in the draft, you're going to have a shiny new toy, right? And a DK Metcalf, you're still going to have a Tyler Lockett, because if you're going to bring in a rookie quarterback, you want to try to surround him and give him assistance, right? And give him weapons. And Seattle, they have a plan at quarterback. And obviously, because they bypassed on taking one in this year's draft, that signals that they're going to take one next year, no matter what happens this year, whether or not they trade for a Baker, whether or not Drew Lock balls out, whether or not Geno Smith balls out. Like, I think it's, and I'd 100% put all my eggs in this basket. Seattle's going to draft a quarterback next year, whether that's in round 1 or 7, they're going to take one. I think that's a guarantee, and that's definitely a bet that I would place. And so I think with the DK Metcalf, it's only a matter of time. Now, if I had to put if I had to specify what I feel like the contract would be, I'm thinking it'd be just slightly above AJ Brown. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, AJ Brown's 4 years, $100 million. I could be wrong, but I do remember him getting about $25 million annually. But I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 years, $106 million, 4 years, $108 million. Potentially, I think with a peak of 4 years, $110 million, which would be $27.5 million on an average annual basis. And I know Seattle, I guess they're going to be a run-first team, but a DK Metcalf, I mean, this guy is special. We've seen what he can do in this league. His best year is the second-team All-Pro in his second season in the league. He already has the Seahawks single-season record for most franchise receiving yards in a season. And Steve Largent is no scrub. So DK, he's already doing great things. And I think it's only a matter of time. It just Fans gonna have to wait on it. But I think for the most part, we can't say his future is secure. We just can't be 100% because Pete and them were on board saying that, Russ was going to stay, or that they were under the impression that he was going to stay. But then, as we all know, like you talked about, he got traded. And so I can't say with 100% certainty, but I'd definitely go in the 80 to 90%.
And just for clarification for all the listeners and viewers, AJ Brown's extension with the Eagles is 4 years, $100 million. He had a $23.2 million signing bonus. He's averaging 25 a year. He's guaranteed $1,000 short of $40 million guaranteed at signing. He's got $57.2 million guaranteed overall. He'll be an unrestricted free agent by 2027. It's really hard to say if anyone's future is secure in Seattle, if I'm just being honest. I mean, I'm not a fan of the Seahawks, obviously. I'm not the furthest thing from a fan, but I'm not a fan of the Seahawks. But there's a lot of uncertainty, I think, in Seattle, and I don't think that, and I think that Russell Wilson moving is the perfect indication of that. I mean, we know how much of a competitor that DK Metcalf is, and Tyler Lockett and all those guys that are on that roster. And like I said, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but we could be seeing the last season of Pete Carroll in Seattle. Like, DK is on the verge of entering his prime if he's not already got one foot in the door of his prime right now. We're talking about a situation where you're not going to have a good, reliable quarterback for at least 3 seasons. This season, next season, and then the season after that. As far as, okay, Drew Lock is a good quarterback, but Drew Lock is not the most reliable quarterback in the league. And if you go out and you draft a rookie, okay, well, he's going to need a year to kind of get his feet wet in the league. And while he may have a good rookie season, we're not really going to know what we're getting out of that rookie until the second season. So it's going to be about 2 or 3 years. And look, DK is a phenomenal player. I expect DK to stay, but we also all expected Russell Wilson to stay, and we see how that turned out. DK doesn't strike me as the type to demand a trade. Doesn't strike me as that type of player. He seems like a pretty loyal guy, but I wouldn't put it past him if he said, "Look, listen, I want to win. I want to compete." And Seattle right now is not the best place for DK as it pertains to wanting to compete. If that's what DK wants, if DK wants to just kind of stick it out and wait, which, I mean, we see guys do that sometimes. Again, that wouldn't be shocking. I think DK's future and his job security, for lack of a better term, is really based on what he wants. And if DK wants to stick it out, then he'll 100% be there. He'll sign that contract. He'll sign the contract either way. I don't think that's the issue. I think we're talking long term. Does DK Metcalf when will DK Metcalf say enough is enough if he ever gets to that point? Is really the way that I'm looking at it. And I don't know. I just don't know. Like, just knowing what I know about what we see all the time out of football players, like whether you're the top of the top, whether you're a young guy that's trying to get to the top, or whether you're just signed one of those veterans that's kind of somewhere in the middle, at some point you want to win a championship, and you always want to be in the best place to do that. And with Russell Wilson at the quarterback position, the Seattle Seahawks, regardless of whether they're the sexiest team in the league or not, the Seattle Seahawks always have a good shot of winning a championship with Russell Wilson your quarterback. Well, Russell Wilson's not your quarterback anymore. It's going to be Drew Lock, and then maybe some rookie. And it's not to say that, we can't get a situation like, say, for instance, Bryce Young lands in Seattle in his second season. He's doing Patrick Mahomes like things as far as leading Seattle to conference championships and Super Bowls and winning MVPs and all that stuff. That's very possible, but there's a reason that Patrick Mahomes is the only player in NFL history to have accomplished what he's accomplished at the age that he is, right? So that's rare. It's not often that we kind of see a young quarterback just burst onto the scene in that dramatic of a fashion and take a team from being maybe mediocre to subpar to being a perennial or an annual Super Bowl contender. So I say all that to say DK is going to sign the contract before the season starts. He'll have a contract. I just don't know if DK will want to stay throughout his contract. And I think we'll maybe see that depending on what his like. I wouldn't be surprised if DK signs for 3 years, 75, he'd still be making as much as AJ Brown annually at 25 annual. He have some stuff guaranteed or whatever, however that stuff works out. But it'll be interesting to see. You know, like we talked about Deshaun Watson earlier, or we talked about Deshaun Watson on the show with Justin Monday about how him and his agent and the Browns, they kind of work that money out so he can still make that money on the back end, because they knew that he really wasn't going to be playing this season, so he's not really losing any money. Well, DK is going to want to make all his money because he deserves it, but it'll be, I think the kind of contract that DK and the Seahawks agrees to will give us some indication of how DK is feeling long term, because short term he's going to be in Seattle. I don't know, because Seattle knows that the price tag for DK is high, and if DK gets traded, they're going to need, you can't. You're going to need it all, right? And DK knows that, and he understands that. I'm sure he does, right? And he knows if he demands a trade, it's going to take a lot, because Seattle is going to want to get everything just right in that trade, and he might not end up where he wants to go. So it really just all depends. I think the kind of contract though that he signs will determine how he feels long term. Short term though, he's there. I don't think there's any questioning that. This is a new era for Seattle. This will be the first time that they're going into week 1 without Russell Wilson being the starter since Russell Wilson's was drafted in 2012. So we're starting all fresh. The Seattle ushers in a new draft class. I already know how you feel about it personally because we talk off camera, but just for the sake of the people, I mean, I'll sit here and listen to you say all these things again. I don't really want to, because I know what you're going to say, but how would you grade the Seattle Seahawks 2022 NFL draft class?
Man, I absolutely loved it, you know, and I try to be as objective as I can be, you know what I mean? I'm not just because I'm a Seahawk guy, because I'm from Seattle, you know, because that's my hometown team. It's not, you know, it's not a good reason for me to be biased or whatnot. I try to be objective, even if at times I might come off as subjective. And I'm not even just talking to you, right? I'm talking to the public as well. But hey, y'all, I mean, look, this draft class, I loved it, you know. And I started off with Tariq Woolen, who actually I was on FaceTime with this dude just a couple of weeks ago. You know, my brother happened to be giving him a haircut, and yeah, I was on FaceTime with them, and I was just like, he told me how he saw the video and how he's tuned into the YouTube and whatnot. And so
can we hold on, Steezy, I love you. Can we not act like, and by we I mean the guys listening at home and gals, of course. Can we not act like Steezy didn't just sit here and say that he was on FaceTime with an NFL talent? Like, I feel like we're not. I feel like you kind of brushed it over. And look, this is not an act. Steezy's a very humble guy, and he doesn't look. Steezy's not going to toot his own horn. I will. That's a big deal. You just on that's insane. I feel like you haven't. I feel like you didn't give that enough attention. The attention that it deserved. Like, we're talking just casually shop talk with NFL talent. He's like, oh, yeah. He's in his haircut. No big deal. No, that's a big deal. I just wanted to say that. I feel like Steezy's not going to toot his own horn, but I'll toot it. Like, we can't just gloss over that like that, bro. You gotta let that sink for a second. You know, you gotta let it marinate for a little bit, man.
Hey, gratitude, bro. Thank you. I really appreciate that for it. That mean a lot, bro. And look, he kind of just told me that he was going to, you know, tap in with me, and he followed me on Instagram or whatnot. So I was just like, damn, like, that's crazy. I was just on the phone with, you know what I mean? And so, but there's a reason why I started off with the Tariq Woolen. He's just one of my favorite draft picks, period. Whether or not he went to the Seahawks, you know what I mean? I just think his unique profile, right, if you will, 6'4", 205 pounds, runs a 4.26 40 at 42 inches. And I know athletic traits aren't everything. You know, we've seen guys come into the league with just crazy measurables, right? And they haven't always panned out. You know, I'm not just salivating over the physical traits and athletic ability and whatnot, you know, but I just feel like with the growth that he's shown, the improvement that he's shown, he's only played cornerback, you know, for 2 years. He came to UTSA as a wide receiver his first 3 years, and his last 2 years he played cornerback. And I just thought that the growth that he showed, he demonstrated, you know, it was a lot. And so I just think that bodes well for his future. And I started off with him, like I said, for good reason. He was my favorite draft pick. And because he's one of my favorite draft picks, Seattle, they also made a ton of other great picks. I mean, Charles Cross, arguably the best offensive lineman on the board. Boye Mafe, a pass rusher who should have went in the first round. Now, a lot of people are kind of questioning the Ken Walker selection. They talk about value and whatnot. I did have Seahawks reporter for The Athletic, Michael Sean Duger, on my draft show about a month ago, and he talked to me about how, like, at the end of the day, even if he feels the need, even if he's special as a talent, just a running back in the second round, you kind of lose points because, you're not getting the most, you're not extracting the most value. And while I understand what he's saying, I mean, this is a part of Seattle's identity. And if he's anything like a beast mode, or if he's like a healthy Chris Carson, but even better, I just think that Seattle's going to be a lot better than people think in the next year or two. You know what I mean? A lot quicker than people think is what I mean to say. And so Ken Walker, I mean, Abe Lucas from Washington State, another great pick, another value pick. Kobe Bryant from Cincinnati, he won the Jim Thorpe Award as the best cornerback in football last year. I know there isn't too many, but there's some people out there that actually think that Kobe Bryant is a better corner than his teammate, Ahmad Siles Gardner. And he might not be as athletic, he might not be as shut down, he might not be as big, but I think he's a leader. He's proven. He's a vet. He's very instinctual, very knowledgeable, versatile. And so I think he's going to be a lot better than people think. Tariq Smith, Bo Melton, Derek Young. I can go into all these guys, but I'd be talking forever. And so I think overall, again, I think Seattle knocked it out of the park. Seattle's kind of been a team that everyone's been pooping on these last couple of years. Everyone talks about, especially the national media and fans alike, they talk about how Seattle just can't draft in the first round. And then they talk about how Seattle is kind of doomed Russell Wilson because they've been failing to draft adequately. You know what I mean? That's been fair. I think the criticism has been fair. Seattle's had, a few home runs here and there, but for the last couple of years, they've struggled. This year, I think they shined, and I'd give them an A- for that.
I'm not going to grade the Seahawks draft because I can't. I'm not going to repeat anything that Steezy said. I mean, there's no need to do that. That's not good for business. What I will do is I will talk about Pete Carroll. Is this Pete Carroll's last season as head coach in Seattle?
No, not at all. I think there's a chance that Seattle, the team, is going to be sold. And I think if that happens, I mean, why fire Pete Carroll? You know what I mean? He pretty much is the Seattle Seahawks head honcho, because Jody Allen, I don't know if you know this, but a lot of people over here in Seattle, they kind of look at her as just this owner who just does not give a F about the team. Like she's just not invested. She's not putting in any sort of time. And again, this isn't me talking. I'm just the messenger. But this is kind of like the word, around town. Like, oh, she doesn't care about the team. She doesn't watch games. She doesn't attend conferences. She's not, out there in the public, and things of that nature. And so I think I say that to say that because she's not really around the franchise, Pete Carroll is the franchise. He's essentially the owner as well. He's the vice president of football operations on top of being the head coach. He has say over anybody and everybody else except for Jody Allen. But then the person that he doesn't have say over, when she's not even invested, when she doesn't, quote unquote, care about the team, why does he got to worry about his job security? Who's going to fire him? A pending owner? I highly doubt it, especially not with the fanfare that he has here in Seattle. I think he leaves when he feels like he's done. And I think that he still has another 3, 4, 5 years left in the tank. I know at the start of last year, I kind of was an advocate for him to go, but I've since softened my stance. And as you know, Dwayne, I'm not married to my statements. I feel like my opinions change with the facts. And so what I mean by soften my stance, and because not everyone knows this, they just think that, oh, he's the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. He's also the vice president of football operations, meaning he has final say over all roster and personnel moves. That means more say than John Schneider. And so if the only person, again, I'm going to reiterate this, if the only person he answers to is Jody Allen, a person who's not as invested, he's pretty much the head honcho. No one's going to tell him otherwise. And so I think with that being the case, with Seattle kind of being in a retooling / rebuilding phase, it's kind of expected that Seattle's going to lose this year. If they're to somehow make the playoffs or win 7, 8, 9 games, and he overachieved. And so that's all the more reason not to fire him. And so I think because, again, it's expected that they're going to lose, his job is safe for as long as he wants it to be.
I feel the same way about this as I feel about Jerry Jones and Bill Belichick. It is, the resume's nice having 2 jobs. It's beautiful, right? It is. Look, I bet it feels good, right, to be your own boss. I'm sure. But here's the thing: the same way I think that owner Jerry Jones needs to fire general manager Jerry Jones, the same way I think that Bill Belichick either needs to relinquish his general managing duties because he hasn't had a good draft in God knows how long, or he needs to relinquish his head coaching duties so that he can hopefully maybe get a good draft at some point down the line. I think that Vice President of Football Operations Pete Carroll should relieve head coach Pete Carroll of his duties. And it's not because Pete Carroll's a bad head coach, but it's really just because of all the things you just said. Like, here's the thing about Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll is the heart and soul of the Seattle Seahawks organization. He is fantastic. Been to 2 Super Bowls, won 1, right? He's been incredible. He is. I don't know what else there's left for Pete Carroll to do at this point as a head coach, and we're turning over a new leaf in Seattle at this point. There is no harm in Pete Carroll relieving himself of his duties. He's not being fired. He's the one that makes the decisions. So it's not like the owner or the GM is saying Pete Carroll needs to go. No, it's Pete Carroll's recognizing like, I'll still be here. I'm still going to be in the war room. You know, I'm still going to be involved heavily with the Seattle Seahawks. I just won't be the head coach. I think that would be best for Pete Carroll. I think it'd be best for Seattle Seahawks. Of course, this last season they're going to suck anyway. Whatever, but that's going to happen whether he's the head coach or not. But I think I always think it is important, and I've always felt this way, that if you're bringing in a rookie quarterback, which is what the Seattle Seahawks are going to be doing, then there needs to be just a fresh everything. And we sat, especially in situations where we're talking about the coach potentially being on the outs. And that's where we're at right now. Like, we were talking about Pete Carroll maybe needing to go, and that maybe Pete Carroll should have been the one to leave instead of Russ. Obviously, there are a lot of fans that didn't know what you just said, which is that he is the vice president of football operations. Being the vice president of football operations means firing yourself isn't really firing yourself because you still have a job. And no one knows the Seattle Seahawks better than Pete Carroll. No one knows what it takes to win a championship in Seattle better than Pete Carroll. And I feel like sometimes guys in the league that have multiple roles tend to let one of them struggle a little bit. That's just human nature because we can't multitask, right? Being the vice president of football operations, that doesn't stop during the week because he's the head coach and he's running the practices and all that stuff. No, like, those are still things he has to do. And I think that, again, I think Pete's an incredible head coach. I know he's going to the Hall of Fame. Like as a head coach, he is spectacular. There's not much left for Pete to do. If I'm off the top of I can't think off the top of my head right now. Maybe he hasn't won a coach of the year, but that's it. And at this point, is he really going to win one? Probably not. He could, but he's probably not going to win one at this point. And honestly, who cares? Again, he is the head coach of one of the greatest defenses of all time. He is the head coach of a team that went to back-to-back Super Bowls. There aren't many teams in history that have gone to back-to-back Super Bowls. They didn't win back-to-back, but they went to back-to-back. He was the head coach of a team that won one of the most lopsided, if not the most lopsided Super Bowl in history, 43-8 against the Denver Broncos. And he's responsible for bringing in, he's responsible for turning Seattle into what Seattle was. Because before Pete Carroll, and more importantly before Russell Wilson, Seattle didn't have a championship. And they got one under Pete Carroll. Like, there's not much else for Pete to do. He's not going to go somewhere. Pete Carroll is to Seattle as Mike Tomlin is to Pittsburgh. Like, Mike Tomlin's going to retire a Pittsburgh Steeler, whether it's on the sideline or whether it's he leaves the sidelines to go into the front office. That's going to happen. We just saw in the NBA, Brad Stevens relinquish the role of being head coach to go move into the front office. And what did that result in? It resulted in the Boston Celtics returning to the NBA Finals for the first time in 12 years. Pete Carroll's phenomenal. He clearly has the IQ. He's the longest tenured head coach in the NFC. Bill Belichick is still his elder, but he's the second oldest head coach in the league. Like, you got all this great knowledge. Clearly, we've got a good draft out of the Seattle Seahawks, which means that he knows what he's doing as far as that concerned. So, yeah, Pete Carroll should follow Pete Carroll. You can bring in your guy as head coach that you want, whatever, because let's be honest, like you said, John Snyder's not going to tell him no, that's what he really wants to do. That's what he really wants to do, right? You can bring in a new head coach. You're already going to bring in a new quarterback. I think that at this point for Seattle, it should all just be one fell swoop, because what you don't want to happen is you don't want to draft, and I'll just use an example again. You don't want to draft a Bryce Young, and then Pete Carroll's the coach for, let's say, 2 or 3 more years, and then Pete retires or fires himself or whatever, and now Bryce Young has to learn a new system because a new head coach has to come in. You don't really want to do that, whether it's Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud or whoever the rookie quarterback is, or even if it's Drew Lock. Like, you don't really want to do that. Like, you want it to be one smooth thing. You really don't want to have your rookie quarterback, playing under too many coaches unless they're like, like that
in-house hire. Unless it's an in-house.
Unless it's an in-house hire, right? So unless a coordinator or someone gets promoted to the head coaching position, if you're going to bring someone, if you're going to outsource and bring someone in, whether it's from college, whether it's a coordinator from another team or whatever the case may be, you really don't want to do that unless it's in-house, to your point. So unless Pete Carroll is looking in-house, and there's potential for in-house, but I mean, the entire coaching staff, if I'm not mistaken, has been revamped this season. So there's new faces in there as well, unless one of those guys get promoted. I just really think this should be Pete Carroll's last season, not because he's a bad coach, but because we're entering a new era of Seattle Seahawks football. And I think there's no more Russell Wilson, there's no more Bobby Wagner, right? Those are your 2 cornerstone pieces, offensively and defensively. You moved on there. The only guy left is Pete Carroll. He'd still be on the he'd still be, again, a part of the facility and all that stuff, making the decisions as the VPFO, but just be the VPFO. You don't have to be the head coach and the VPFO. Something's got to give. In my opinion, I could be wrong and I could be in the minority here, but that is what I've always felt, that one guy wearing 2 hats doesn't just because he can do it doesn't mean he should do it. Is really the point here.
It's not always ideal. What if it was flipped though? Because I'm in favor of him staying as a head coach, but him relinquishing, the front office.
Either way,
you're the opposite.
Either way, I mean, I don't really think it matters. What I'm saying is, Pete is, how old is Pete? He's almost 70.
He is 70.
If he's not, so he's 70 years old. Like, Pete doesn't have many years left coaching ahead of him, but Pete can be in the front office for another 10, 15 years if he really really wanted to. You know what I mean? Like, I would much rather Pete work from behind the scenes than Pete be in front, because eventually what's going to happen is, and this is just the unfortunate reality with media and the way that football and sports works, as much as Seattle Seahawks fans love Pete Carroll and are very appreciative for Pete Carroll, if at some point you're going to want something new. I mean, like, at some point Pete Carroll is going to become, if you don't think he is already, at some point Pete Carroll is going to become out of touch with the NFL and how to coach successfully. Not that he'll be a bad coach, but you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And I think that is the territory that Pete Carroll is now starting to enter. Is he's starting to enter the you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And because he's now had a really good draft, build on that. Have another good draft next year and another good draft the year after that. You're going to have the capital from all the picks you traded for and all the picks you're going to have for not being a good football team this season. Whether it's he's no longer VPFO and he stays head coach, or the other way around, I just think he should relinquish one. And I think it'd be better if he relinquishes the head coaching post and just be VPFO, because he's really good at that. Like, he is outstanding at that. And that's just my take. Again, if you think it should be the other way around, that's fine. If you say, look, Mark, if you're a Seattle Seahawks fan and you say, Marcus, shut the hell up, I will. I don't really care. That's just my take. Forget it. I don't know. Steezy didn't tell me to, so I guess I'm doing something right. With that being said, though, we both have the Seahawks picking somewhere in the top 10, 12 picks of the NFL draft, which means they're not going to be good this season. They're not going to have a winning record, but we got to figure out how many wins they're going to have. So, how many wins do you see your Seattle Seahawks accumulating when it's all said and done this season?
Ironically, I think that it's going to be identical to what the Denver Broncos had last year without Russell Wilson. And this might sound asinine, but I'm going to say 7. I'm going to say 7-10. Because I think outside, I'm not saying Seattle's without their weaknesses, right? I'm just saying that outside of quarterback, I don't look at this team and say, there is such a glaring weakness at this position group that they're just going to be terrible because of it, right? So I look at quarterback. Obviously, that's a glaring hole. Running back room, I think there's depth. I think Seattle's fine there. Wide receiving core, I think it's a lot more than just adequate. Tight end room, you re-sign a Will Dissly, you bring in a Noah Fant, a first-round talent. I think Seattle's okay there. Offensive line, now they could use additional help. They could use reinforcements because there's a whole bunch of young guys, that you're hoping to anchor this line. So obviously, maybe they could use some veteran depth, if you will. But I don't think the offensive line is as big of a weakness as it has been in years past, just because Seattle invested two, top tier, or they invested premium assets, in first and third round picks. And then there's still Stone Forsythe from last year. And so I think Seattle's okay on the offensive line. Pass rush, now they can use some depth there. Linebacker, use some depth there. I think everywhere else, I just don't see like that glaring weakness. And so I think because of that, and we've seen talent deficient teams in the past, win games that they're not supposed to. I mean, Brian Flores and the Miami Dolphins, remember them, 2019? They were supposedly the worst team of the most talent deficient team in NFL history, and they went 5-11. 5-11. Remember when it was like the first 3 weeks of the season, they were getting blown out by like 50, 60 to the Cowboys, to the Ravens, to the Cardinals, and we were just like, oh my goodness, like, does it get any worse? And so any given Sunday, right? We stress that, and there was a world in which the Jets beat the Bengals last year, for crying out loud. And so I think, in Seattle, they're just going to be one of those feisty teams. That's why I'm in favor of Pete staying on as a head coach and him relinquishing those front office duties, because I think he's actually better as a head coach. He's that rah-rah guy. He's the guy that establishes and builds the culture. He's, player friendly. And so if he's on the field, I think he's helping the guys more than he is in the front office, even if he's doing a good job up there as well. But I think on the field, he connects with the players. That's why it's going to take a lot longer for him to lose touch, I feel like, quote unquote, because he's still, he acts a lot younger than his age. He's really in tune with these guys. Like, guys care about him. He cares about guys genuinely. And so because he doesn't act his age, I could see him lasting a lot longer. But I think all that being said, Seattle's going to go 7-10. They're going to be feisty. They're going to be one of those physical teams that nobody wants to play, and I think they're going to play a lot differently. Well, not differently, but obviously they're going to want to run the football, smash mouth football. Defensively, I think the defensive line, the interior of the line is stacked with a whole bunch of quality depth. And so I think, 7-10 right now, but things can change. So just be mindful of that.
The at worst, they'll have 5 wins on the season. I don't think it gets worse than that. Giants, Jets, Falcons, Panthers, Lions. Those are the 5 wins I have for them. I could see them stealing one against the Cardinals because I've never been sold on the Cardinals. I can see them stealing a game against the Rams because whether it's Jimmy G or whether it's Trey Lance, aside from that, I don't think the gap between the Rams and the no matter who the quarterback is, the gap between the Rams and the Seahawks, I don't think it's that big. Hate me for it.
The Niners and
the Niners and the Seahawks, excuse me. The Niners and the Seahawks, yes.
Well, Seattle already has their number.
There's that too. I mean, and so I'm going to say low in their 5.
Yeah.
High end, the Seahawks make the playoffs.
Yeah.
And I think they make the playoffs with G.O.A.T as the quarterback, just because of how bereft of good teams the NFC is. And you can call me crazy, but once you get past the Bucks, the Rams, and the Packers, every other team in the NFC, including my Packers, have some glaring question mark. And I can just run down the list for you very quickly. Look at the Saints. What does Jameis Winston look like post ACL? And what does Michael Thomas look like after missing an entire year of football? Those things matter, right? You talk about the 49ers and the Cardinals. Where's their identity? For the Cardinals, are they going to be able to stay afloat without D-Hop for the first 6 weeks? And when D-Hop comes back, what does that mean for Hollywood Brown? Because now he's there. How does that kind of affect things? And we'll talk about the Cardinals a little bit later down the road in the series. My Packers, everyone for some reason thinks Aaron Rodgers is all of a sudden just going to suck without Devontae Adams. I don't know who you are that thinks that, but you're an idiot. But there are people that think that. Maybe there is a step back a little bit as far as what the offense looks like. I don't think so, but it's possible, right? You talk about obviously the Dallas Cowboys, and I won't say the Cowboys are the Cowboys, but what I will say is statistically, without Amari Cooper, Dak Prescott's an average quarterback, and you can check the stats, and the stats will show that. That's not hate, because I think Dak Prescott's a top 10 quarterback in the league today. But without Amari Cooper, he hasn't played like one in his career. That's a question. You look at the Eagles. It's Jalen Hurts is Jalen Hurts really the guy in Philadelphia? Well, I think so. There is still the question of, is he really? Right? With the Vikings, it's the defense. The Lions and the Bears, bad football teams. Panthers and the Falcons, bad football teams. Right? You look at Washington, New York, bad football teams. So the only two teams that really don't have any sort of question marks are the defending champion Los Angeles Rams, rightfully so. They are the defending champions, and the Buccaneers, because they got Tom Brady as their quarterback, and they're still really talented, and they really haven't lost anyone aside from Rob Gronkowski, and that's not even really that much of a loss. And it's not because Gronk is bad, but it's because you have a capable tight end in Cameron Brate sitting right there in the wings that was going to be the tight end before Tom Brady asked Gronk to come out of retirement to join him in Tampa Bay on their Super Bowl run in Tom's first year in Tampa Bay. So if the NFC is bereft of good football teams, of playoff football teams, in my opinion, right? This isn't the AFC. We're talking about potentially an entire division making the playoffs in the AFC West, or a powerhouse like the Buffalo Bills, or a really good young team still in the Cincinnati Bengals that's not getting a lot of love because Lamar Jackson's going to be back, or a Lamar Jackson-led Ravens. There's so much talent. There is still the looming threat of maybe a Dolphins or a Panthers can maybe sneak in there depending on how good they are. Even the Colts, right? There's a lot of good playoff teams that are potentially playoff worthy outside of the Bucks and the Rams. That's not the case in the NFC. Obviously, the Packers will make the playoffs because we're going to win the division. Obviously, you would like to think that the Dallas Cowboys will make the playoffs, whether it's as a division winner or as the second seed in that division. But if we're just looking at all these teams on paper and saying, is there a weakness? Is there a question mark? The only two teams that have no weaknesses, glaring weaknesses, or no question marks are the Bucks and the Rams. And because of that, despite the fact that we all expect the Seahawks to be bad this season because there's no Russell Wilson, as we talked about earlier, Drew Lock's not a bad QB. The Broncos won 7 games last year with Drew Lock as the quarterback, right? I have been beating this drum from the moment the trade happens, and I'll keep beating this drum until people get it through their head. The gap offensively, specifically offensively, between the Broncos and the Seahawks is not that wide, and you can make a legitimate case, that the Seahawks have a better offense. You can make, obviously, ignoring quarterbacks, obviously, because with Russell Wilson, obviously the Broncos have the better offense. But if you're just looking at everybody else, there's a case to be made. Is it a strong case? Who knows? But it's not as glaring as you would think, because Russ is the QB, and obviously he'll make Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy look much better because he's a veteran and he's been doing this for a long time. With all that being said, though, again, 5 I think is the minimum. I'd be shocked if they win less than 5, because I just named you the 5 games they're going to win. Both games against New York football teams, Jets and Giants, Panthers, Falcons, and Lions. Those are 5 wins right there. I say high end they win 9 games, which I think 9 games is enough to be the second seed in the NFC West and make the playoffs as a 6th or 7th seed in the wild card. Do they win a playoff game? Probably not, but it's possible, right? Because as I say all the time, division games breed upsets, and also there's just a lot of toss-ups on the schedule that where you can look and say, it could go either way. Like, they could sweep the Cardinals this year. They could sweep the 49ers this year. You really just don't know. So with all that being said, thank you, of course, as always, for coming on the show. I tell you all the time that the people love seeing you on the show more than they love seeing me on the show. And I'll never quite understand that, because it's my show, for crying out loud. But for some reason, they love you more than they love me. But whatever, as long as they're watching the show, I guess that's all that really matters. Please let everybody know where they can find you, though, and all your content.
My God, man. Hey, this was fun, bro. Thanks for having me on. I just want to say to all the people out there, if you aren't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe. I mean, we had the NBA Finals show, or the Warriors and the Steph Curry show, from a Friday ago. And, bro, I mean, that's since eclipsed 2,000 views, right?
No, it's still at 19.
Oh, still at 19?
It needs to be over 2,000. If you haven't watched that video, please, it's really good. Steezy was there. Peyton was there. Blaine Spencer was there. Neil Hoyt got him from behind the camera of this, Justin, in front of the camera on this show. And, of course, the Facebook felon during one half of Stuff About Sports was there. Well, I can give you the actual count right now. I believe it's sitting at 1,900 right now. Let's take a look right now.
Hey, but I was just going to say, though, so all y'all tuned in, but more than half of y'all didn't bother subscribing? Like, what? Yeah. I know y'all enjoyed the show. Yeah. I know you guys do enjoy the show. And so
1,506 followers, views. It's the most. It is the most watched episode in the history of the show, and I am very, very thankful to all of you for that. 100%, I am.
And I'm glad to have been a part of it, Dwayne. So again, thanks for having me on there. Thanks for having me on here. But to the people, again, yo, hit that subscribe, please. Follow my man, follow my boy here on Instagram, Twitter. We just out here trying to get it. You know, we just a couple of young bucks out here trying to get it. So if you guys would would be willing, excuse me, would be willing to support the grind. Yeah, please do that for us. And then last but not least, ask Steezy A Smith for me, SteezyASmith. I know I'm a big Seahawks guy, but that's not all I cover. I mean, I try to cover a lot of NBA, rest of the NFL, a little bit here and there, everywhere. So be sure to show me some love, y'all.
Yeah, I would appreciate if you guys would click the subscribe button. If I'm not mistaken, of all the people that watch the show, about 60% of you guys are not subscribed to the channel. So subscribe to the channel. Or don't. I can't really force you, but I'd appreciate it if you do. We're at 112. I said at the beginning of the calendar year, I wanted us to get to 100 by the end of the year, and we've done that. So now the goal is to get to 150 by December 31st, and we're at 112. So 38 more people need to subscribe. I would like for 38 more people to subscribe to the channel before December 31st. To make me feel even more special, I'd appreciate it if 38 more people subscribe before August 1st, which would be the 2-year anniversary of the show. But whatever, I'm not being greedy. I've already passed my goal for the year of 100. Now I'm just asking for cherries on top. It's fine. I'm very appreciative to all 112 of you that are subscribed. I'm appreciative to the 15 of you that will watch this. And if there's more, I'm appreciative to you guys as well. As I said, Vikings on Friday, Money in the Bank on Saturday. Then we're back next week with Browns and Ravens. No show on Monday because it is the 4th of July, and I want you guys to. It's the 4th of July. So next Wednesday and next Friday we'll come back with Browns and Ravens with my guy Peyton Doyle, Peyton Doyle show. He'll talk about his Browns, and then he'll be back on the show to talk about their division rival. Ravens, and we'll just keep going all the way through. Also, there will be a show also next week about the NBA offseason preview and kind of recapping the draft with my guy Martin Sories of the Basketball Society. He has his own podcast now, and he's really been doing a lot of great things, and I love talking to him. So it would be nice to get him back on the show for the first time in a while. We've got some other interesting interviews coming up as well. I won't spoil too much, but there's some stuff coming down the pipeline. Also, I just want to say this because Steezy didn't say it. Steezy also neglected to mention the 37 million other accounts that he's affiliated with as of right now, i.e. Press Sports and 32-bit TV and the Belt and the all that. He's all over the place. It's relatively speaking, okay? Relatively speaking. I'm everywhere it's obnoxious, but Steezy's everywhere it's absurd. So if you can't find Steezy, you're really not trying because he is on everything and it's insane. And I enjoy watching Steezy do and be and work the way he works. So again, thank you, Steezy, for coming on the show. It's always a pleasure. Thank you guys for watching and listening and tuning in. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Don't forget to follow on all the socials at G3 Markets on everything: Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and iHeartRadio at Go Talk with Marcus. So for Steezy A Smith, this is Marcus with Go Talk with Marcus signing off. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, you guys enjoy the rest of your lives.